Welcome to this episode of my podcast. My name is Kalsoom, and I specialize in training medical professionals how to get the score they need in IELTS or OET so that they can get their dream job, take their career to the next level, and start living their best life with their families by providing them with bigger and better opportunities. Before I start with the main topic for this week's episode, I just want to make you aware of how you can use this podcast to your maximum advantage. This is no ordinary podcast. You can use this podcast by one, simply listening to the podcast to get some advice that will help you in your IELTS or OET preparation. Number two, actively listening to this podcast to improve your listening skills. I try to keep it short. I know you guys are very busy people, but you can use it for focused listening practice. So you can use the show notes, which is a complete transcript of each episode. You can read the episode as you listen and analyze the language, learn new words or phrases, practice pronunciation and intonation. Number three, also included in the show notes are some comprehension style questions that you can use by reading the transcript, using your skimming and scanning techniques to answer the questions. Answers are provided at the end, but you can also check your answers by listening to the podcast. Number four, you can use it as a listening test and answer the same questions while listening. And number five, I also include a brief analysis of some useful words or phrases that I have used in the podcast, which you can learn. So it's up to you how you would like to use this tool. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your colleagues and social media so that more people can benefit from it too. Hi, and welcome to this episode of the IELTS and OET Made Easy podcast for medical professionals. It's been a while since I did a new episode, and I've been receiving lots of messages asking when there'll be another episode, so here it is. Just a few things to mention before I talk about the main topic of this episode. Remember, in the show notes, I have a few freebies for you, things that will help you stay on track with your IELTS and OET preparation, as always, alongside this podcast as well. Number one, there is a link to my free training, How to Plan for OET Success. This is a set of 5 videos that take you through every aspect of the test and how you should be preparing for it. This training alone has helped so many doctors and nurses get the score they need, so please go and take advantage of it. Number two, there are links to my free OET Facebook study group where you can find a community of doctors and nurses all in the same boat as you. You can find study partners, speaking partners, and there's also lots of guidance from me. Number three, you'll find a link to join my flagship OET Success membership group where you receive daily live lessons, lots of practice and feedback, and where I share all my answer strategies and skill improvement techniques. Also, you'll have my email address if you want to ask me any questions, either about any of the trainings or the membership. You're more than welcome to email me. Okay, so this week's episode is all about the 3-minute preparation time that you're given before the speaking role play begins in the speaking test. So there's a lot of confusion and a lack of guidance in this area. And as a result, I've seen that it can be the main reason why people do badly in the speaking test, just through a lack of preparation, a lack of knowledge for the role play. Not because of their level of English, just because they failed to look at the scenario in front of them and respond appropriately to their patient and the situation that they have in front of them. You may have a really good level of English. You may be able to speak fluently, have a really good level of vocabulary, be clearly understood. You may get full marks, in the linguistic marking criteria. Yeah, remember there's the linguistic marking criteria and the clinical marking criteria. So you may score really, really well linguistically, Yeah, your grammar may be really good and all that kind of thing. But if you haven't spent the time understanding the scenario, the patient, the setting, the emotions that are involved, the actual tasks that you are meant to complete, and if you haven't responded appropriately to any of these things, then you will fail. And that's a really important point for you, for people to understand. A lot of people think it's just all about, the linguistic side, the grammar, the vocabulary, and obviously it is, the fluency, that is a part of it, but it's not all of it. Thinking that all you need is good English is completely wrong, and you will fail with that attitude. Yeah, like I mentioned, there's two sets of marking criteria that have to be fulfilled that the examiner will be looking at. And, you need to understand that. So everything I've just mentioned, the setting, understanding who the patient is, who you are, where you are, so the setting, relevant, what is the relevant medical background that you've been given? What is the relevant social history that you've been given? What is missing? What do you need to ask? What are the patient's concerns? What are they concerned about? What is their mood? There is always some kind of emotion involved. What emotions are you being told that the patient is showing? What do you do? What do you have to do to complete the role play? So there's a set of tasks that you need to complete. What are they? All of this needs to be taken into consideration before you start your role play. Now, that seems like a lot to consider in 3 minutes. And I think this is why some students feel it's too much to do or it's too difficult. And they think it's so much easier that they'll just, if they just go for it, quickly read the task, get a quick understanding and, not plan it, not think about it, and they'll just wing it. Meaning, wing it means that they'll just be able to handle it on the spot, just make it up as they go along through the role play. And this is a huge mistake. Like I said, it may seem like a lot, but really it only takes less than a minute if you know what you're doing, if it's something that you practice. And that's all it is, it's just practicing. So this should form part of your preparation, practicing what you are doing in those critical 3 minutes. So let's take a look at what you need to do in those 3 minutes. So the first thing you need to be clear on is the setting. Where are you? You need to understand where you are. Are you in a clinic? Are you in a hospital? Is it a home visit? And, these things are important because if you are in a hospital, for example, if someone has had emergency or needs to have an emergency operation, that's really going to affect the type of role play that you're going to have, the tone, the language, how you're going to deal with the patient, how you're going to speak to them. If a patient has just been brought into A&E with, wounds or whatever, or some kind of issue, or it's their child that's just been brought into A&E and you're speaking to the parent, that changes how you address the patient or the person or the parent, the carer that you're speaking to. So you need to know these things. If it is a matter of urgency, like in an emergency situation, then, that is going to be a completely different type of role play as compared to someone who's just coming for a regular checkup at their clinic. Is it a routine appointment? This all sets the tone of the role play, the language that you will use. Yeah, so you need to be very clear on that. The other thing you need to be clear on at the beginning is, do you know the patient? Or is this your first meeting? So for example, maybe this is a regular GP visit from one of your patients. you're going to address them very differently as compared to someone you're meeting for the first time. You're going to address them by their name if you know them. If you don't know them, you're going to have to do a whole kind of introduction. But you wouldn't do an introduction of who you are and confirming their name if you already know them. Yeah. You're not going to ask them about their whole medical history or things like that because you already have it, and so on. So these things have to be very, very clear, and you will get marked down. If you don't bother to check these things, you will get marked down for them. It shows that you haven't looked at the role play, you haven't understood the situation and the setting that you are in, the context that you are in, and you haven't responded appropriately. Yeah. So yeah, this will impact how you start your role play. Is it an appropriate introduction or not? Yeah. Also, what is the purpose of the visit? And we've mentioned this. So is it emergency? Is it a routine checkup? Is it a workplace checkup? Is it a follow-up visit? Is it a patient returning for test results? What is the purpose of the visit? Yeah. Also, what background details are you given? And identify what is relevant. So some of the information in the role play task isn't actually relevant, but some of it is. So what I mean by this is some of the medical history or the social history. You need to decide very, very quickly what is the main medical issue and what are the facts that are relevant. Underline it, circle it, highlight it, do whatever you want, but make sure you are clear on what is relevant and what is not. Also, what are the patient's concerns and emotions? What are they worried about? What do they want to know more about? What are their concerns? And what emotions are they showing that you need to take into account and address accordingly? So, they could be anxious about something. They could be angry about something. They could be in a hurry. They could be uncooperative. They don't want to cooperate with what you're saying, the advice that you're given. They could be depressed. They could be drunk or intoxicated in some way. What is that situation with the patient? There will always be something. And that's something that you will need to address accordingly throughout the role play. So, for example, if someone is very anxious, that's a pretty common one. You need to, and you're told this in the role play, you have to actually address your patient accordingly. Your tone and your language needs to be reassuring right from the get-go, right from the beginning. The next thing you need to be clear on is what you need to do. So underline, circle, highlight all the verbs that you have in the bullet points in the task. So you'll have words like ask, inquire, discuss, explain. You need to highlight all of those words and be clear that, these are the things that you need to do. And sometimes, you've got to be careful because in one bullet point, there can be more than one of these words. There can be, 2 or 3 sentences and 2 tasks in one bullet point. So be careful that you're not missing any tasks out because sometimes there can be 2 in one bullet point. So read carefully. You may need to take history, social history, medical history, or both. You may need to explain a medical condition or a medical procedure, treatment. You may need to advise a patient on their options, on their treatment options, or the next steps. It may say, educate your patient on particular lifestyle choices. Yeah. You may need to reassure. Yeah, that could be one of the tasks. Reassure your patient or persuade your patient because maybe they're non-compliant. They don't want to follow your advice, or they haven't been taking their medication, or they haven't been doing the exercises, and they haven't been following the diet plan or whatever. Yeah. Perhaps you need to justify a diagnosis or a treatment or next steps. Yeah. These are the tasks that you need to be clear on. And once you're clear on this, you decide and make notes on the structure of your consultation. Yeah. Once you're clear on all of these points I've just mentioned, you need to decide very, very quickly the structure of your consultation, because you are the medical professional and it's your responsibility to lead and direct the conversation. So how are you going to do that? Yeah. So the first thing you need to do is decide on the type of introduction. How are you going to start this conversation? How do you need to start this conversation? And that depends on everything we just talked about, where you are, if you know the patient or not. Is it the beginning of a conversation, or is it in the middle of the conversation? Is the scenario starting at the beginning of a conversation when you are going to the patient, if you're in hospital, you're going to their bedside to speak to them, or is it starting when the patient comes into the consultation room and sitting down? Is it starting at the beginning, or is it just starting right in the middle of a consultation? Sometimes it starts just after you've finished examining the patient and you're just about to tell them your findings. So you need to be aware of where this conversation needs to begin. If the case notes say, you've just finished examining your patient and you are about to discuss your findings, you're not going to start your role play by introducing yourself and confirming who the patient is and then starting the conversation from there. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That clearly shows that you haven't looked at the scenario and what you are not aware of what's happening. Yeah. So you would start mid-conversation. You would say, right, thank you, Mr. Smith. I've completed your examination, so I just want to discuss a few things with you. I believe you have, or I suspect that you may have XYZ. That's where you would start. So you need to be aware of that. Or do you need to start with that introduction because it's right at the beginning of the conversation, you're meeting for the first time, you would start with a formal introduction. I'm Dr. Smith. Can I confirm your name? And so on. Yeah. Secondly, as you're reading the task, write down any phrases, any sentences that come to your mind while you're reading. So while you're looking through the task and, understanding the scenario, what's happening, phrases and sentences may come to your mind. Ideas may flash into your mind. Don't think that you'll remember it for the role play. Just write it down straight away. Trust me, you won't remember it. Once, you start the role play, you're under pressure. You'll be thinking, oh, what was that word I thought of? If you've got it written down, you can look at your notes and you'll remember. It'll prompt you. And that's really what your plan should be, is writing down prompts, words and phrases that will help you remember what you need to say and how you're going to say it and in what order. Yeah. Also think about the tasks and how you will start them. So, for example, the task says explain a medical condition. How are you going to do that? In your 3 minutes preparation time, write down just brief notes. Obviously, you don't have time to write out the whole dialogue. You're just writing brief notes of how, just to remind you how you are going to do that in a structured way. So, for example, so if you have to explain a medical condition, so for example, I would say, okay, can I ask you, so say I have to explain what diabetes is. I would start off by saying, can I ask you, first of all, what you know about diabetes? So I would put in my notes, question previous knowledge or prior knowledge of diabetes.
Yeah, so that will prompt me to say, okay, I need to ask the patient what they already know about diabetes before I dive into a whole explanation. It could be that the patient knows quite a bit about diabetes already, and there's no point repeating that information. It could be that they know absolutely nothing about diabetes. So, that question then, you're gathering information from the patient first of all, and with using that information, you are tailoring your response accordingly. So if someone knows nothing about diabetes, then you have to start from the basics. If the patient tells you, yeah, I know there's type 1, type 2, and XYZ, so from that, you would tailor your response. You wouldn't have to go through all the basics because they already know. And you would say, yep, that's absolutely right. And you have type 2 diabetes, and this means XYZ. So you're using what the patient tells you for your response. But you've written in your notes that you have to ask the question before you give the explanation. Yeah. And that shows structure. That shows that you're thinking about the structure of your conversation. So patient says, I don't know anything about diabetes. So you would respond, okay, so let me explain what diabetes is. Firstly, there are two types of diabetes. The first type is XYZ and is usually treated with XYZ. The second type of diabetes is XYZ and is usually treated with XYZ. Is that clear so far? So obviously I wouldn't write in my plan all of that. I would write prompts. So depending on what they say, you could structure, you would have to think about, okay, if they answer this, then I have to think about what to say. If they say that they don't know anything, then you would write down firstly, secondly, the structure of how you will explain the treatment, the condition. So you would write down firstly, two types, treated with. Second type is called whatever, treated with, and that's literally what you would put, just a few words just to prompt you through the explanation. That's it. And you would do that for the rest of the role play for your 3 minutes. Just putting down, once you've highlighted your tasks, you would just put down few words that will prompt you, to ask questions, to ask the right questions. If it's asking you to give an explanation, how would you give that explanation? Just put down little prompts. Remind yourself to say firstly, secondly, thirdly, which shows that you're structuring your response. How are you going to signpost what you're saying, using things like firstly, secondly, thirdly. And, checking for understanding. A lot of students forget to do that. So asking, is that clear so far? Have I explained that clearly? Do you understand? Making sure you're writing that down in your notes so you don't forget to say it. Yeah. People always say, oh, no, I won't forget. But under pressure, in that situation, you forget even the most basic things. Having it down on your paper, it just gives you that little bit of confidence that you've got your notes to rely on. For example, if another example is if your patient is very worried or anxious about a diagnosis, how would you reassure them? So, the notes say, the patient is very anxious, very worried about the diagnosis, reassure them. So how would you do that? So I would say something like, Mrs. Smith, I can see that you're really worried, and that's really normal. Diabetes is very common, and the good news is that it's very easily managed. And obviously, we're here to guide you on how to do that. guide you and support you on how to do that. Yeah. So in my notes, I would put, see you're worried, it's normal, diabetes common, good news, easily managed, we are here to help you. Something like that I would put. Really, really quick notes that will just prompt me through the conversation, that I will just look at my paper and I know exactly how to complete that task. So you would really do it task by task, right? So yeah, remember that you're writing really brief notes. You're not writing the complete dialogue. So don't get bogged down with that. So using the 3-minute preparation time more strategically, it ensures that you understand the role play and what is happening. What is the situation? And it ensures that you're clear on what you need to do and you have a plan on how to conduct the conversation. And you also make sure that you don't miss anything out, which is very common. And it makes your role play more fluent because you're not thinking on the spot. It's very similar to what I say about the writing. So once you have that reading time, you spend the rest of your writing time, you spend the first 5 minutes of your actual writing time planning your letter. You should never go into the writing time just writing the letter straight away. Spend the first 5 minutes planning out your letter, the structure of your letter. It's exactly the same thing here. The 3 minutes preparation time is where you get all your thinking done, all your thoughts onto the paper, and you're thinking about the structure. Yeah, so plan it out first. And you're more likely to get the score. It's very simple. The students that really practice this, they get the score that they need. They have a much better role play. And with anything, this takes a lot of practice. And what I would advise you to do is to get a few role plays, set a timer for 3 minutes, and go through the steps I've just mentioned. Initially, it may take longer than 3 minutes, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. You're practicing. So you need to keep practicing in order to reduce the time to 3 minutes. And you'll find that you'll create your own way of writing notes that you understand. So there's no right or wrong way or a particular way of writing the notes. You need to write the notes in a way that will make you understand. Even if you're writing it in your own native language, but obviously, make sure you're getting the vocabulary right. The vocabulary that you think of in English should be in English. But anything that will help you, any form of shorthand that will help you in English, do it. So it may take you longer than 3 minutes in the beginning, but with practice over time, again and again, you can reduce that to 3 minutes once you find your way of writing your notes that makes sense to you, that helps you. But this is something that has to be done, and most students do not do this. They just practice the role plays, just the speaking. You are given those 3 minutes preparation time for a reason, and you need to make sure that you're using it to your full advantage. Obviously, you use that time as well to ask any questions to the examiner, just to, firstly, remember to confirm that you can use the examiner's name for the patient's name. If you forget, don't worry, you can just make up any name, say, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, and, the examiner will respond to whatever name you choose. And if there's anything in the role play that you don't understand, you can clarify in those 3 minutes as well. But please make this a part of your preparation. And it may seem difficult in the beginning, but trust me, it will help you in the long run. So I hope you found this useful. As always, listening to this podcast alone will not improve your scores. I share easy practical advice for you to put into practice. So it requires action on your part. So get going and start implementing what you've learned, because that's how you'll improve your scores. Remember to check out the links in the show notes, and I'll catch you in the next episode.
I really hope you have found this episode useful. Please let me know if you have. I would love to get your feedback, and if there is something you would like me to do an episode on for IELTS or for OET, please just let me know. The details on how you can contact me are in the show notes of this episode. And remember, nothing changes if nothing changes. If you are not willing to change or implement advice and you keep doing the same thing, you will keep getting the same results again and again. Real progress, real improvement comes when you push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your colleagues and on your social media so that more people can benefit too. Take care and keep working hard.